Welcome back, everyone. Ready to dive into some more AI craziness?
Always.
Today, we're going to explore something called AI hallucinations. It's basically when AI systems, like make stuff up. It can be pretty wild, honestly, but also kind of scary when you think about it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's important to remember, though, that AI hallucinations, they aren't a sign that the AI is, becoming conscious or anything.
Oh, okay. So it's not like they're trying to trick us.
Not really, no. It's more like a symptom of, the limitations of the technology. They're just making mistakes. That's all.
Right. Okay. So, like that example, I think it was in one of our sources, where an AI claimed that Amitabh Bachchan was like the 35th president of India.
Yeah, I saw that one, too.
Pretty funny, but also like, wow, that's not good.
Exactly. Like, it shows how AI can take real info and then, twist it in a way that sounds believable but is totally wrong. And as AI gets used more and more for, important stuff, like legal things or even helping doctors, well, these hallucinations could have some really bad consequences.
Okay, so let's get into it. Why do these AI hallucinations happen? What's going on that makes the AI go off the rails like that?
So a big thing is the data they're trained on. AI systems learn from these huge data sets. But sometimes that data is incomplete or it has errors or even biases baked in. So if the AI is learning from bad info, it's going to spit out bad info too.
Right, so it's kind of like, what's that game? Telephone, where the message gets all messed up as it goes around.
Yeah, exactly like that. And also, AI doesn't really understand the information the way we do. It's really good at picking up patterns, but it can miss the nuances. Like it might be able to write a grammatically perfect sentence, but the facts are all wrong.
Okay, so they're good at grammar, bad at fact-checking. Got it. Are there any other reasons why AI might hallucinate?
Definitely. Another big one is if the prompts, the questions or instructions we give to the AI, if those are vague or open-ended, it basically gives the AI permission to make stuff up.
So we need to be super specific.
Exactly. Clear instructions lead to better answers.
Makes sense.
Oh, and one more thing. Sometimes AI hallucinates because it hasn't been specifically trained for the task at hand. AI models are constantly being updated, but they can still struggle with certain specialized areas where they don't have enough training data.
Oh, so even if an AI is generally really smart, it might not be an expert in everything.
Right. And that's why it's super important to be aware of the potential for hallucinations, especially as we use AI for more and more important things.
Okay, let's get real world here. Can you give us some examples of where AI hallucinations have actually caused problems?
Sure. There was this case where a lawyer was using AI to do legal research,
What? Hmm.
and the AI came up with all these fake case citations. Sounded totally legit, but were totally made up, obviously caused a big mess for that lawyer.
Wow, not good.
Yeah. It shows you can't just blindly trust AI.
Definitely not when it comes to the law.
And it's not just law either. Think about AI hallucinating medical cures.
Oh, right, like giving people false hope.
Exactly. Could have really serious consequences. And it can happen in more everyday settings, too. Like, there have been cases of AI tools making up fake citations for academic papers. You can imagine how that could mess up someone's research.
So it's not just about high-stakes situations. These hallucinations can pop up anywhere.
Yeah, pretty much. So we really need to be critical of the information we get from AI, even if it sounds convincing at first.
All right, now that we're thoroughly terrified, are there any ways to prevent these hallucinations from happening in the first place?
Well, the good news is there are. And one of the most promising ones is called prompt engineering.
Prompt engineering, that sounds fancy. What is that?
So basically, it's about crafting really specific prompts for the AI. It's kind of like giving someone super detailed directions instead of just being like, go get me food. You might end up with something you didn't want.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Like one of the sources mentioned how asking, tell me about a scientist who discovered time travel is a really bad prompt. It basically invites the AI to make something up. But if you rephrase it to respond factually, is there any scientific evidence of time travel discoveries? You're much more likely to get an accurate response.
So being intentional with our language can make a big difference.
Huge. We have to set the AI up for success by asking the right questions in the right way.
Okay, what other techniques are there?
There's this really cool one called retrieval-augmented generation, RAG for short.
RAG. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about RAG.
So with RAG, you basically connect the AI to external databases so it can access real-time facts. This way, it's not just relying on its internal knowledge, which could be outdated.
So it's like giving the AI a direct connection to the ultimate fact-checking resource.
Exactly.
That's pretty awesome. Are there other strategies?
Yeah. We can also fine-tune AI for specific use cases. This means training it on datasets that are relevant to a particular field, like medicine or law.
Ah,
Hmm.
so it becomes more of an expert in that area.
Precisely. A general AI might be good at general knowledge, but if you want it to give accurate medical advice, you need to train it on medical texts.
Right, makes sense. But even with all these precautions, is there still a chance for errors?
Oh, for sure. That's why fact-checking and post-processing are also super important. We need to double-check the AI's output before we actually use it.
So basically, have a human editor look it over.
Pretty much. There are even tools out there now that integrate fact-checking to help prevent the spread of misinformation.
That's good to know. What about the users themselves? Can we do anything to help combat these AI hallucinations?
Absolutely. Platforms are starting to incorporate user feedback loops where users can flag inaccuracies. This helps the AI learn from its mistakes and get better over time.
So it's like a team effort.
Exactly. And speaking of teams, we also need to consider the companies that are actually building these AI systems. They play a huge role in making sure their AI is accurate and reliable.
Okay, so the companies building these systems, like OpenAI, Google, AWS, they have a responsibility here too.
Oh, big time. They're the ones creating the platforms that power all these AI applications. It's not enough to just throw these powerful tools out there and not worry about the consequences.
So what are they doing to make sure their AI is trustworthy?
Well, for starters, OpenAI is using those user feedback loops we talked about to improve the factual accuracy of its models.
Oh, okay. So they're actively working on those data limitations we discussed earlier.
Yes, and Google is focusing on incorporating more retrieval-based methods like RA, to bring in more real-time information.
Smart. What about AWS?
AWS is taking a similar approach, giving users more options to customize their AI models with specific datasets.
So sounds like there's a lot of positive movement in the industry. But this is still a relatively new field.
Oh, absolutely. It's constantly evolving, and there's no magic bullet solution just yet.
All right, well, I think that's a good place to pause for today. We've learned what AI hallucinations are, why they happen, and some of the ways to prevent them. But before we go, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. As AI gets more sophisticated and a bigger part of our lives, how do we balance the benefits with the need for accuracy and, just good old-fashioned critical thinking?
It's a big question for sure, and honestly, there's no easy answer. But I think a big part of it is making sure AI development is transparent. We need to understand how these systems are built, what data they're using, all of that.
Right, so it's not just about the tech itself, but also about having some ethical guidelines in place.
Exactly. We got to think about the big picture. How is this tech going to affect society? We need to be sure it's actually benefiting humanity.
Makes sense. It's like with any powerful technology, right? We need to be careful. Like nuclear energy or genetic engineering.
That's a great point. And another thing is bias. Remember how we talked about biased data? If an AI is trained on biased data, it's going to have biased outputs, and that can have some pretty serious
Oh
consequences.
yeah, that was a bit scary. You mentioned earlier that some companies are trying to address these issues. Like, what are they actually doing to prevent hallucinations?
Well, one thing they're working on is improving the data itself, making sure it's more representative of the real world, and doesn't include harmful stereotypes.
So being more mindful of what we're feeding these AI systems.
Exactly. And they're also developing ways to detect hallucinations, like using statistics to find patterns that might suggest a hallucination, or creating algorithms that can double check the AI's output with external sources.
So a lot of research going on behind the scenes.
Oh, tons. But it's a tough job because AI is evolving so quickly. It's exciting, but also a bit of a challenge to keep up.
So it's not a one-time fix, it's an ongoing process.
For sure. And it takes a lot of collaboration between different fields computer science, ethics, even policymakers. Everyone needs to be involved to make sure AI is developed and used responsibly.
You've given us a lot to think about. Before we move on, can we go back to RAG for a sec? That technique where AI can access external databases, it sounds really promising for reducing hallucinations. Can you break it down a bit more for us?
Sure thing. The basic idea behind RAG is that AI can do better if it has access to more information. Like imagine you're writing a research paper, you wouldn't just rely on your memory, right?
Yeah, you look at other sources, do some research.
Exactly. And that's what RAG does for AI. Instead of relying on what it already knows, which could be outdated, it can search through external databases and get the latest info.
So it can fact-check itself in real time.
Pretty much.
Hmm.
Let's say you ask an AI using RAG to write about new cancer treatments. It could actually pull up the most recent research and clinical trial data.
Wow, it's amazing, especially in fields like medicine where accuracy is super important.
Absolutely. And it's not just for facts either. Our Ray can also access creative stuff, like poems, stories, even code.
So it could help writers or programmers too.
Totally. The possibilities are huge.
But are there any downsides to RA?
There are some challenges, like sometimes the information isn't available digitally or it's hard for the AI to access. And then there's the issue of making sure the AI is searching the right databases. We need to find ways to organize the data so the AI can actually use it.
So it's more complicated than just plugging the AI into Google.
Right. And R can be expensive to implement. It takes a lot of computing power. But as AI gets more advanced, we should see more affordable options.
It's exciting to see how RAG could make AI more reliable, but like we've been talking about, we need to be careful and responsible with this technology.
Completely agree. AI has so much potential to do good, but it's up to us to make sure that happens.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today, from what AI hallucinations are to how to prevent them to the role of responsible AI development.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
It really has. And
Yeah,
I think it's a conversation that we all need to keep having.
definitely. AI is changing the world so fast, we got to stay informed and engaged.
Absolutely. So to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the wild world of AI hallucinations. And remember, we'll be back tomorrow with another deep dive into a whole new AI frontier. Until then, stay curious and don't be afraid to question everything, even the AI.